Mr. Kalish, would you take the roll, please?
Carroll. Murphy Lopez.
Here.
Van Landwit.
Here.
Seat.
Here.
McKee.
Here.
Brewer.
Here.
Luck. Manning. Gatto. Glassburner.
Here.
Rudersdorf. Gentis.
Here.
Turk.
Here.
Cosgrove.
Here.
Frank.
Here.
Severson.
Present.
Williamson.
Here.
Cooey.
Here.
Thank you. Nelson. Call. And McGuire. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Mr. Kalish, do we have anyone here for the invocation?
We do. We have Michelle Alfers from St. John's Lutheran Church.
Okay, if you would please.
Let us pray. Almighty God, I lift up before you all who govern here in Richland County. I ask you to bless them, that you may give them wisdom to understand it is a trust from you that they are to be in service for all people. We pray that you guide them during this ongoing pandemic. Grant them wisdom and grant us all health. Grant us courage and inspiration to strengthen our economy and our community well-being. Give us all grateful hearts for all the blessings that you have given us throughout Richland County. Bless all that gather here and who lead our county government, that they may do their work in the spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice. Give us grace to live together in unity and peace. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Mr. Kalish, would you lead us in the pledge and then read the agenda for tonight?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, tonight's agenda is a 26-point agenda. Roll call, invocation, pledge of allegiance, approve agenda, approve minutes of September 21st meeting, the public hearing on proposed 2022 county budget, resolution awarding the sale of $1,050,000 taxable general obligation promissory notes, resolution pertaining to adopting the Richland County budget for 2022, ordinance relating to a parcel belonging to Stephanie Griffin and David Hammond in the town of Aiken, ordinance relating to a parcel belonging to Ron and Mary Yoon in the town of Orion, report on petitions for zoning amendments received since the last county board session, report on rezoning petitions recommended for denial by the Zoning and Land Information Committee, ordinance reapportioning supervisory districts according to the 2020 census, and ordinance amending ordinance number 89-7 relating to the Richland County Sheriff's Department, a resolution recognizing a retirement of an employee of the county treasurer's office, resolution approving amendments to 2021 contract for the Department of Health and Human Services, a resolution approving 2022 Health and Human Services revenue contracts, a resolution approving 2022 provider contracts for the Health and Human Services Department, a resolution approving the 2022 to 2024 Richland County Aging Plan, a resolution approving Richland County's participation in a state program providing specialized transportation assistance, a resolution approving the Land Conservation Committee applying for and accepting a lake monitoring and protection grant from the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, resolution approving a new collective bargaining agreement with the Richland County Sheriff Deputy Sheriff Association, WPPA, the union, appointments to various boards, commissions, and committees, reports from the administrator's budget report, condition of county, and proposed changes in committee, boards, and commission assignments, correspondence, and adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Kalish. You've heard the reading of the agenda. What's your pleasure? Mr. Cosgrove, seconded by that guy, Richard McKee. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. We have an agenda. The minutes of the 21st meeting, September 21st, were published. Do we have any questions or changes or additions to those minutes? If not, I will declare them good as published. Thank you. Now we go to the public hearing portion of the agenda on the proposed 2022 county budget. And I would guess Administrator Langrick is possibly going to handle this part.
I can, Mr. Chair, if I can also then incorporate underneath reports, we can talk on the report and the condition of the county, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
Okay, so folks, if you can take a look at item number 24A, that you'll find in your packet. And then if you're on the website as well, 24A, and I'll try to share it here on the screen as we go along. So there's two different elements here that I want to report on today. First is a narrative from your administrator regarding the budget packet. The summary was included in your budget packet as well. We'll go through the report, kind of touch pieces on the tracker, as well as then the budget summary, to ensure that everybody has a fair understanding of what we're going to be voting on here tonight. The breakdown of our report here, the content, we're talking with you in regards to the budget objective, process and preliminary guidance, budget adjustments, budget impacts, the short-term financing and capital improvements, future financial challenges, the condition of the county, and then, like I said, we'll reference two attachments here, the budget tracking and adjustments worksheet, as well as reference to the 2022 budget summary. So our budget objectives are laid out for you on pages 1 and 2. They talk in regards to what our goals were with the budget. And these goals were approved by your Finance and Personnel Committee on July 16th of 2021. They included levy, meeting the operating levy limit as imposed by the state of Wisconsin. Our services, operating within the levy limit, we wanted to protect effective delivery of our essential services and to the greatest extent possible maintain our current discretionary services. We responded to the COVID-19 impacts and utilizing the American Rescue Plan in accordance with federal guidance. We had capital improvements and capital outlays within the operating levy, again, supporting the county's infrastructure and trying to do that in a way that doesn't cause future spikes in our tax levy and rate. We also then decided to continue with our annual short-term loan financing and capital improvements of capital outlays for programs identified over $5,000. And that's something that we'll be taking action on as well then tonight with the award sale of our bonds. Preservation of undesignated general fund. We wanted to maintain a 25% of our operating budget for general operations. And then wages and benefits. We wanted to meet our projected increase in adjustments to health insurance, as well as make our incremental adjustments to employee wages to progressing towards the goal of meeting market value as determined through our 2018 study. So these goals were established to direct the efforts and outcomes of the budgeting process as managed by the administration and overseen by the Finance and Personnel Committee. The additional challenges that we accounted for at the onset of the budget process included Chapter 54 and 44 adult and child placements, and to increase those expenditures by a $500,000 estimate. Land conservation, we wanted to include in a land tech and rent that were unaccounted for as an oversight in the previous year's budget. Unfunded mandate for district attorney office of $65,000 for an additional person in regards to mandates through Marcy's law. Incorporate wages, the zoning land information with a reduction of the land information grant by $25,000, and then increases in wages. Again, trying to get us back on schedule with aging our existing wage schedules from 2018. So those were again the additional challenges that we put in place as we approached our budget. The overall goals, we were able to meet all of those goals, as you can see here, but keep that in mind as we reference our impacts on the section and we talk about how we were able to meet those goals. The process and the preliminary guidance, I wish I could tell you it's going to get more exciting, Bob, but it's not. So staying in there. This is the process that we went through in building the budget. So our first step was appropriations request and guidance. We solicited out our guidance to departments and told them how to prepare their preliminary budgets. The departments submitted their preliminary budgets. We conducted our department hearings. The administrator reviewed and made recommendations. The Finance and Personnel Committee reviewed and made recommendations. And then tonight we are submitting the budget for yourselves for consideration and adoption. Departments and partners were instructed to draft their preliminary budgets with 0% levy increase. That included expenditures for their salaries, fringes, contracts, operations, but without considerations for capital outlays that would be incorporated in short-term borrowing. So when we gave that guidance out to departments, they submitted their preliminary budgets in accordance with that. And with the added documents that we had, or the added items from above, we arrived at a $464,000 budget gap that we knew that we were going to have to close. How did we close those? We closed those budget adjustments through, again, that process that we talked about. Departments submitted their budget worksheets, supporting documentation, the budget narratives. They helped describe the impacts imposed by meeting those guidance. As you can imagine, with the increase in wages and health insurances, and then bumping up against the ceiling and saying, we need you to increase your levy zero. There was many cuts, many different maneuvers that had to be used to try to meet that and still maintain services. Departments then also kind of petitioned to have different expenditures reinserted into their budgets, and additional funds to help continue to provide the services that their clientele and our citizens need. So we developed a gap tracking adjustment spreadsheet that we built to help capture the different petitions from the departments and identify the different fill options to explore for the purposes of trying to balance and have everything on the table at the same time. If I can divert you from the language down to the bottom of your document, if you can scroll down to pages, starting on page 8, you'll see kind of what that tracking document looked like. So this is a spreadsheet format that we used. We had all of our departments again come in through the budget hearing process, and we gathered what their needs were. We placed it kind of, if you will, all on the chopping block or all on the table to evaluate it all at the same time. So the top part of this section again kind of talks on the specifics of the guidance that went out. You'll see on the bottom of page 8, roughly $465,000 gap that we were attempting to fill. Our departments came in, you'll see here on the top of page 9, for example, Health and Human Services. They came in with petitions for a couple of different agenda items, as well as an identified cost of how we could potentially have more fill. So if you kind of go across the columns there, you'll see the department. If it's an add-in or a takeout type of the impact is for services. Is that add to our additional gap? Essentially, is that more expenditures or is that less revenues? And then we identified then fill options. So this is the tracking sheet that we kind of used that identified all of our different potential levers to, again, add more expenditures to our budget, creating a bigger gap, or adding more revenues or reducing expenditures to close our gap. And I'll take your attention then back up to where we left off on page 3. So now that you've seen kind of the document that we used, our working document, and arriving at the budgets, let's talk about the impacts of the budget. So the 2022 budget objectives were met with utilization of fund balance from Pine Valley reserves to the tune of $505,000, contingency reserves of $300,000, undesignated general fund balance of $88,000, and the continued use of short-term financing and capital improvements. Please remember that. The 2022 budget included the addition of roughly 2.1 full-time equivalent positions. The budget accounted for the continuation of the added assistant to the administrator position, which was added this year. It added a district attorney office position, again, for mandates from Marcy's Law, and added a casual position to MIS to support for the many virtual meetings that we're using to conduct our public business, much like tonight. The 2022 budget absorbed a 16% increase in health insurance premiums. The increases are a result of our group's usage and the increased cost of medical care. The 2022 budget allocates additional funds of nearly $1.5 million to adult and child institutional placements. $1.5 million to reflect the recent trends and expenditures needed to adequately cover those services. And the 2022 budget results in a slight decrease in the millage rate for property owners. Our short-term financing and capital improvements, again, this year we're engaging in that, of $1,050,000 of bond sale to raise revenues that will be incorporated into continuing our highway county trunk improvements, our vehicle and fleet management, technology capital improvements, the addition of a salt sand shed, jail improvements, and facility maintenance. Future challenges, the condition of the county. As we enter the 2022 budget year, the conditions of Richland County remain that continued financial challenges resulting from our aging infrastructure, state-imposed levy limits, and increased expenditures resulting from rising costs in health insurance, benefits, cost of living, materials, and services. The 2022 operations budget is balanced on the use of waning surplus funds, which does little to address the county's need for sustained reductions in operational expenditures and reduced infrastructure liability resulting from our ownership of many buildings. The 2022 budget, Richland County has made significant efforts to preserve services and compensate our staff with the use of waning surplus funds. The 2023 budget will likely not have fund availabilities to cover these sustained expenditure increases. As we begin our 2023 budget, we are entering a process that we anticipate already $1 million levy gap resulting from the following items used to build the 2022 budget and the estimated expenditure increases. Going forward into 2023, we're not anticipating on having $300,000 in contingency funds to use. We're not anticipating on having $85,000 of undesignated general funds. We're not anticipating having the full $500,000 from Pine Valley. If their business model holds true from where they were at this last year, it potentially is $300,000. But right now with our staffing shortages, that also becomes kind of compromised. Our wage increases for general employees, if we are trying to stay on our schedule again to reach market value, we're estimating at $200,000 against levy, as well as health insurance increases. If it's another 15% or so, we can expect another $250,000. If we're entering into a radio tower project, which we know that we're in need, and in fact, we're kind of overdue on need for that project, that would be about a displacement of $214,000, which in fact is just interest for the first few years. So if we give the same 2023 guidance to the departments of a 0% increase, we would currently be expecting about $1,035,000 to a $1.25 million gap that we're going to have to find fill with to reduce our expenditures and increase our revenues. The additional challenges and considerations that we're facing as we enter 2022. As we know from census, we have a decreased population, now at 17,252, down from what should have been, I missed a 1 there, 18,028 residents in 2021. A radio tower project we're undertaking is needed. It's overdue. The improvement of our emergency radio tower system, this undertaking will likely require bonding that will range from $6 to $10 million. This added debt service will put the county at roughly 50% of our legal capacity, which will impact our future borrowing ability for the next decade. This needed investment will make it harder for us to continue maintenance and upkeeping on our existing buildings and infrastructure. If we bond under conditions of not increasing our county's contribution to the millage rate, this will have to be offset with short-term borrowing or operations levies. So again, essentially, if we're taking on an additional $214,000 of debt service, that's got to push into our short-term loaning, or it's got to push into operations to fit. Deferred maintenance on buildings and infrastructure. The county owns and maintains many buildings: courthouse, health and human services, Pine Valley campus, college campus, highway garage campus, fairgrounds, an auditorium partner, airport partner, and a collection of many other small buildings, stations, and service centers, etc. We will soon be closing on the addition of the Richland Electrical Co-op building, which will be remodeled into a new ambulance garage and emergency management center. We know this building will need roof improvements within the next 3 to 5 years. We're operating with many identified deferred maintenance needs. Without addition or identification of excess revenue sources, we will not be able to safely and responsibly maintain all of our buildings and infrastructure. Healthcare staff recruitment and retention. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the struggles of recruiting and retaining certified health providers and staff at our skilled healthcare rehabilitation and assisted living center. With current staffing shortages, there's consideration of closing a wing. We currently are declining some resident referrals, which means that we have open beds and revenue loss. Our staffing shortages and evaluations, we have identified a need for more staffing support at the courthouse and Health and Human Services maintenance. We're maintaining 2 large buildings with one of those buildings having a 24/7 operation with 3 full-times, 1 contracted maintenance folks. We've identified a need for review of our MIS staffing and functions as our computer and communications needs continue to expand. We've identified needs of the jail administration and tower, radio tower management. Now, our opportunities that we're facing in 2022, capital plan and budget. In preparation for the 2023, it is the intentions of the county administrator to build a capital plan that identifies our buildings and infrastructure, the asset value, the annual maintenance costs, and deferred liabilities to better understand the county's long-term obligation to responsibly maintain its growing real estate portfolio. The Bear Creek Richland County Solar Project, once operation, the solar farm near Lone Rock will provide us approximately $116,667 annually in energy credit revenues annually to the county. So Dave, that's going to help kind of shrink in that $1 million gap. Defederalizing housing funds, we're working with housing. The Housing Authority has held and managed the legacy funds of the defederalized housing grant initiative from a time period when prior to the separation with the county is exploring legal means of reappropriating these funds towards future housing and economic development. The county intends to recoup and allocate about $80,000 towards future initiatives. So again, that can help with our future expenses. As we've talked about in previous meetings, ARPA funds, the county has allocated $3,350,999 in ARPA funds. Our Finance and Personnel Committee has allocated 10% of these towards public health response, 10% towards the assistance in household and business, 10% towards premium pay for essential workers, 20% towards water and broadband infrastructure, and 50% towards discretionary spending claims as lost revenues. Our infrastructure bill, we're waiting to see how that is going to materialize and potentially trickle down. Same with our opiate settlement. Strategic planning and evaluation of non-mandated services. In working with the Strategic Planning Committee and Finance and Personnel, the county administrator has begun to develop a plan to evaluate our non-mandated services. It is the administrator's recommendation that a portion of ARPA funds be used for first to contract industry experts to evaluate operations and develop sustainable business plans for some of our non-mandated services, and 2, to possibly help launch services outside county ownership. So the condition statement that I would have for you tonight is that Richland County continues to provide a very wide variety of services, including but not limited to maintaining bridges, roads, law enforcement, land conservation, zoning, parks, trails, public health, human services, a judiciary system, a jail, registration of records, a college campus, an airport, an ambulance service, nursing home, a fair, an auditorium, service support to departments and tax collection, just to name a few. Despite being underfunded in state and federally mandated programs and the competing demands for service, Richland County continues to be a strong leader in responsible and cost-effective local government. Richland County takes pride in its services to its people. The leadership and staff of Richland County understand that we are overextended with financial liabilities, and that our model of services has reached a point of unsustainability in relationship to our current revenue sources. Richland County, through its elected officials, administrator, staff, and finance personnel, will need to take actions on these understandings in 2022 with a 2023 budget that imposes sustained reductions in expenditures and or identifies sustained increases in revenue sources. Acknowledgements for all the folks that helped put this together. I'd like to thank and acknowledge our dedicated and hard work and commitment of Richland County Board of Supervisors, department heads, our Richland County employees. This past year saw a collection of unprecedented circumstances and challenges, from the lingering pandemic to staff shortages or operational changes, to many missed expectations, to an understanding that needed changes are yet to come. Our staff and board members alike endured with integrity and delivered with professionalism. Richland County is also blessed with many supportive community partners and the fine following of citizen officials and volunteers. Together, we will continue in our worthy goal of local governance for the purposes of peace and prosperity. Myself and staff can take questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Langrick. As this is a public hearing, I will entertain questions from the public or comments in general. A mic will be brought to you, I assume, if anyone wants to comment. Yes.
Cindy Chicker. I'm a member of the Richland County Parks Commission. And I'm here just to ask for a little clarification, Administrator Langrick, on the impact that the gap report has with to the budget summary amount on that table for the Parks.
For Parks Commission?
Yes, for the Parks Commission, properties, et cetera.
With our Parks Commission, the actions that we took we took actions against levy to spend off a surplus of $43,000 balance for a total of $10,000 reduction of funds going into it from this coming budget year. So there's going to be a reduction of $10,000 going into it with the idea of fund balance covering expenses.
So that accounts for the difference between the 38,000 and some that we were budgeted for 2021 with the 2022 budget of 26,972. Is that correct?
I don't have the worksheets right in front of me, but that's the decision point that we had made post the preliminary budget, was to do a reduction with the idea that there's fund balance there to help cover the cost going forward into this next year.
With the understanding that the Parks Commission works at reducing the surplus that we have in an account, which has been accumulating over a number of years due to very good financial stewardship. I've had the pleasure of working with a number of the county supervisors on that committee, and we take financial measures very, very seriously and don't feel that as a commission and all of the parks properties should be penalized with stewardship. We would like to hopefully arrive eventually at an amount closer to that which we would normally have been budgeted without the service. At least that's my personal feeling. We have a lot of projects in the works, and $26,000 isn't going to cover it. Yes, some of the surplus will, but unfortunately, one of the problems that we do have is the personnel costs. And as we look over the budget and what we have to do with what we have to work with, we may not have the support that we need from the land conservation group, specifically, and then the secretary for the commission itself. And they work hard, but we are only allotted a certain percentage of their time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Nee, anything? You're right up front.
Not tonight.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McGuire, as you can speak as a member of the public.
Yeah, I was involved with the River Valley School Board, when initially we were told that solar project was gonna net the River Valley School District $270,000. Why are we only getting 116? And that's why I thought we should be getting more than that. If that school district is getting 270, it's not even in the county where the schools are located, so why are we getting less?
I can't speak to the school district. I know my communications with the state was it's my understanding that when part of the project was being presented, I think it was being presented on the net new construction increases in development on the land, as if we were going to be able to tax them on property tax value increases. From what I gathered, as soon as they go over 50 megawatts, then rather than getting the increase on the net new construction value of the property, you then go down another path of revenues, which is like the energy credits. Some of the presentations I've seen from when it first kind of started off would suggest that the county was also getting like about $250,000 in revenues. But then looking down their like a $15 lifespan, there was a lot of depreciation that kind of went into that, and it tailored down from like multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars to 15 years later being like at a $30,000 kind of a value based on depreciation types of costs. So with the energy credits, it's a sustainable amount over the duration and life of the project. Whether or not that equals out or not, I have to do all the math on the 15 years, but in talking with the state, that was the number I received right from them was they're going to receive this. Provided they're operational in 2022, the energy credits will be effective then going into 2023. Does that answer your question?
Somewhat, so is it somewhat flexible as time goes by? Is that correct?
Well, I think from what I gathered is once you go over a 50,000 or a 50 megawatt, then the project changes. So it's not based on the net new construction and the increased property value. It's based on energy credits and you get back from the state.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
Excellent report, by the way.
Anyone else? Okay, I think I'll declare then the public hearing on the 2022 budget closed. So we're officially closed. And the next topic is a resolution awarding the sale of 1,050,000 taxable general obligation promissory notes. Clerk Kalish, do you have anything to read there?
Other than this will be resolution 21-135. Carol was very kind and provided us, with a nice summary of everything that we will discuss here shortly. So that includes, bid tabulation and then the summary of final sales results. So if you look through that document, you will see it's quite lengthy. So I'm not certain we need to read that all because Carol was here with us to
Right.
review that.
Thank you, Mr. Kalish. And joining us tonight is Ms. Carol Worth of the Wisconsin Public Finance Professionals LLC from all the way here from Brookfield. So, no further ado, I think I'll turn it over to Carol. Yeah, that's fine. Can we give her a mic?
You're welcome to use my.
Whatever, something to do. I'm trying to get the packets out to anybody. Am I missing people here that need?
Thank you.
So, information that we are going to review tonight is the sale results of the $1,050,000 short-term borrowing. And just for your background, the county board adopted what was called an initial resolution back at its September meeting. And that resolution gives the county board authority to proceed with the borrowing. The borrowing itself is to pay for capital projects, and the description was in the initial resolution, and it is in this resolution tonight that says that the funds may be used for trunk road improvements, a salt shed for the highway department, and acquisition of equipment for the sheriff's department, and information system projects. And so that is what the county is limited to in terms of the use of the funds. The funds are, or the note issue itself is sold as a taxable instrument, which means the county does not have a time limit on the expenditure of those funds. And the capital improvement projects are projects that are removed from the operating budget to create room inside the levy limits to pay operating expenses. And the total, these are short-term notes, so that the total principal and interest will be repaid on March 1st of 2022. And that means your levy for the debt service, the principal and interest, is a calculation outside of levy limits. Okay. So when we looked at this borrowing in August and September, we were projecting 2 interest rate, which includes expenses, of a 1.42%. We did not apply for a bond rating because it's too short and you can't realize a better interest rate because of that. The cost of the rating is prohibitive. So the good news is that we did enter the marketplace, and in order to do so, we prepared the booklet that you've received. It's called an official statement. It's basically a prospectus on the county. And that goes into the marketplace to solicit interest from investors and underwriters to place a bid. And this morning, we did receive bids, and I'm happy to report that Richland County was very popular in the marketplace. We received 6 bids this morning. Last year, when we did this for the first time, this program, we received 2 bids. Today, we received 6 bids. The winning bidder happens to be the same firm that purchased the notes last year. The only thing is the interest rate is even lower than last year. So our true interest rate from the winning bidder, which is on the second page of my handout, is BOK Financial Securities out of Milwaukee at a true interest rate of 0.824%. And what's interesting about the list of bidders, which you can find on the top of page 2 of my handout, is that we've attracted interest from New York, from a couple of them out of Pennsylvania, and one out of Minnesota. So we really had broad market interest in the marketplace. So with that, the notes themselves, the way they were purchased, will allow the county to take about $1,031,000 of it for project costs. There's about $18,000 of expenses that the county will pay out of these proceeds. Then there's a small amount of what's called premium that the winning bidder included in his bid, and that's only $504, and that comes to the county as well. So the bottom of page 2 shows how the underwriter bid the issue. It's $1,050,000 at 1% interest rate, but when he gives you the $504 back, that brings the true interest rate down to the 0.82. Okay, so on November 23rd is going to be the closing date. So the county is going to receive $1,050,504. Okay, so the $504 can only go into debt service and will be used to repay the notes on March 1st of 2022. The resolution that is attached, my handout goes to page 3, and then there is a resolution. But there was a draft resolution prepared by Quarles and Brady earlier, and then with today's results, Quarles and Brady prepares the final resolution, which really is the same document, but with a bunch of attachments that has information like the list of bidders and the bid form and so on. So the resolution itself is a 7-page document. It's pretty standard in terms of a borrowing resolution, and it is awarding the notes to the successful bidder. So the, as I mentioned, the pages are numbered at the bottom. So page number 7 is the body of the resolution. The attachments are documents like a notice of sale, which is what is used as instructions to the bidders. That's a few pages long. And then there is the bid tab, which you've already seen in my earlier report. And then there is a bid form that's showing how the underwriters placed their bid, followed by pricing and debt service, which were also in my report. And then a template for the form of note, how it will look. So this resolution is, as I said, locking in the results from the sale and awarding the notes to BOK Financial Securities, and requires a majority vote of the county board.
Thank you, Carol. You've heard the resolution. What's your pleasure? Mr. Ricky Lopez, seconded by Mr. Frank. All those in favor of this resolution indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? It was approved with a majority. Thank you,
Thank you.
and have a good drive home.
We'll do that. Thank you much.
Once per due, once per due. Thank you. All right. Now, we borrowed the money We heard the public hearing on the budget. And the next order of business is to adopt the Richland County budget for 2022. Mr. Haley, do we have a recitation?
So this will be resolution 21-136. Now therefore be it resolved by the Richland County Board of Supervisors of the 2022 budget includes revenues from the county sales tax in the estimated amount of $1,315,000. And be it further resolved that the sum of $10,447,277.17 be used and is hereby levied upon all taxable property in Richland County for county purposes for the year 2021, and be it further resolved that this resolution shall be effective immediately upon its passage and publication. This resolution is being offered to you by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you. You've heard the resolution. I'd like a motion. Mr. McKee? Do I have a second? Mr. Van Lende? Any further explanation needed? Probably not. I think we've gone over it pretty thoroughly.
Mr. Chair, may I speak?
Yes, you may, Mr. Murphy, about that.
I just wanted to say a few things about the process. I'm speaking as the Chair of Finance and Personnel. I think there was a lot of appreciation for the much increased level of transparency with our budget process this year. It was better last year and it's continuing to get better. So I think there was a lot of appreciation about that from the Finance and Personnel Committee. Just hearing Mr. Langrich's reports, his condition of the county report, it's amazing to have that much detail. I'm just very fortunate to our administrator. I'm also feel grateful toward the department heads who wrote about their budget this year and gave presentations. And it was a long day for the Finance and Personnel Committee, but department heads put a lot of work into that. MIS put a lot of work into recording all those meetings so that anyone from the public or on the county board could watch those. And I think the Finance and Personnel Committee believes that this budget balances our priorities. And I think the general sense from the Finance and Personnel Committee, and if anyone from that committee needs to correct me or if I speak out of turn, please jump in. But I think there's an acknowledgement that changes need to occur in future years. And Mr. Langrich put that really well in his condition of that county report. There probably are some differences of opinion or many ideas amongst committee members about how to handle all this, raise taxes, cut discretionary services or non-mandated services. How do you deal with the rub between those two? So we did discuss that in a fair amount of detail. The only thing that I did want to add to Mr. Langrich's report is that a change in property taxes this year for property owners would be, I believe it's a slight drop of 0.4%. Last year, there was an increase of 18%. So this year, the county portion of property taxes would be flat under this budget. So that's me speaking as the Chair of Finance and Personnel. Personally, a few people have asked me why I voted against the budget, and so I wanted to explain why I'm voting against the budget and why I did it. Finance and Personnel. My biggest concern is, and I think Mr. Langrich put it really well in his report, is that use of waning surplus funds. And I think my vote is more symbolic than anything, because I do think we really need to be very serious and concerned about how do we do that in the next county board, whoever is on the county board next year. And so I felt like I needed to say that, in the event that I'm not on the county board, I wanted to say that I think we need to do more cutting this year and not just dip into our savings accounts, mainly because our general fund percentage flattened in 2020. And I personally want to see more reserves for emergencies, but I have a lot of respect for the process and the Finance and Personnel Committee's opinion, and especially for Mr. Lang. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Murphy Lopez. Mr. Frank?
Thank you. Just a quick question for clarification. The second to last line there, be it therefore resolved that the sum of 10 million be used hereby is levied upon all taxable property in Richland County for county purposes for the year 2021. Wouldn't that be 2022?
Yes, it should be. Thank you for the correction and typo.
Typo. Thank you, Bob. Bruce, you read it. Attaboy. Anyone else? Yes, sir, Mr. Turk.
I also voted against this in committee. I will vote for it tonight because I think we're too far down the road to stop it now. We need to have a budget, so. I shared Supervisor Murphy Lopez's reservations about the amount of one-time funds we're using. This is not a sustainable budget in any way, shape, or form. In my time on the county board, I've seen us kick the can down the road, and I think we've kicked it as far as we're going to be able to kick it. And the 2023 budget is going to be painful and messy. And that is the position we've set ourselves into through the exercise of this budget. And that's why I voted against it in committee.
Thank you. Anyone else want to make a comment, defend their vote? No. All right, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the resolution adopting the Richland County budget for 2022 signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay, the budget is adopted. Thank you. An ordinance relating to a parcel belonging to Stephanie Griffin and David Hammond in the town of Aiken. Oh, Mike up here for this, but Mr. Cayley, should you please?
Yes, this will be ordinance number 21-26. Amendment number 535 to the Richland County Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance number 5. That the 2.65 acre parcel belonging to Ron and Mary Ewing in the town of Orion is hereby rezoned from general agricultural and forestry district to the single family residential district. This ordinance shall be effective on October 26, 2021, and is being offered to you by the Zoning and Land Information Committee.
Thank you. You've heard the ordinance. What's your pleasure? Mrs. Glassbrenner, Mr. Williamson seconds. Ms. Glassbrenner makes the motion. Mike, do you have an explanation, the background for it?
The background on this is that they are separating some woodlands and what's their agricultural lands. Since it's being less than 35 acres.
Thank you. All those in favor of the ordinance signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ordinance is adopted. Number 10, an ordinance relating to a parcel belonging to Ron and Mary Ewing in the town of Orion. Mr. Kalish.
All right, this will be ordinance number 21-27, amendment number 536 to the Richland County Zoning Ordinance number 5. That the 2.65 acre parcel belonging to Ron and Mary Ewing in the town of Orion is hereby rezoned from general ag and forestry district to the single family residential district. This ordinance is effective on October 26, 2021, and is being offered to you by the Zoning and Land Information Committee.
Thank you. Mr. Manning, are you? Okay, asking for adoption, and Mrs. Stahl seconds. Mike,
Parcel's being created so it can build another residence on it.
okay, short and sweet. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ordinance is adopted. Number 11, report on petitions for zoning amendments received since the last county board session.
There's a petition by Max Goswell and Beth Anthorn to rezone 2.22 acres from A forestry to residential 2, section 1 on Marshall. There's a petition by Corey and Bethany Thompson to rezone 1.3 acres from A forestry residential 2, all to residential 2, section 13 town Richland.
Okay, and I will correct the pronunciation of Max's last name, because he's pretty touchy about that. It's Gossel, Max Gossel. Thank you for that report. And do you have any petitions recommended for denial by zoning and land information?
None.
Thank you. Now we come to the ordinance reapportioning supervisory districts according to the 2020 census. And I'll call on Mr. Kalish. I know he was a member of the reapportionment committee, but did a bang-up job. Didn't have any time to work, got the census data in late, had many meetings, burned the midnight oil, so to speak. It was a cliche, but they got it done. Mr. Kalish and Mr. Frank, I would imagine, as chair of that committee, you will be participating.
Sure. So when we last met, we all, you as a group approved the tentative plan for redistricting. So what that tentative plan did was establish the supervisory districts that were then released to the municipalities to determine their ward plans and then, carry this process home to have this redistricting process complete. So if you're looking at your information on your iPads, this report that I put together is what we're calling our final plan. There really is no prescribed format for this, but because I felt like we need to have something in our hand and a plan to reference instead of just a bunch of stats that can't be looked at later, I felt it was important to put this together. So this report you're looking at, you're going to see is labeled Proposed Final Plan for 2021 Redistricting. This report you're looking at was approved by the Redistricting Committee last night. So we had our public hearing on this. We did not have anyone show, but we did have some questions come up. But nonetheless, at the end of the day, there was the report that you have there. The final plan was approved by the Redistricting Committee. So if you're looking at that front page, I do have the committee members listed there. So although Lynn and I were involved in this process, we were not voting members of this committee. So you did all appoint the committee back when we started this process in August. Have it be composed of the 3 county board members, the 3 citizen residents, and then the 3 municipal clerks, 1 from the city, village, and township. So those 9 folks worked on this, like we said. If you go to the following page, I just pretty much put a supervisory district map up there. And it is a little, in your report, it's probably a little hard to read, but this was just to provide an overview. Once plans are approved, we can print these things off called shape files that give you supervisors that will be running for office. Again, that map you need to determine where you are. And then the city can also give you the aldermanic districts when we get to that point. You can only go so far with the software before we actually give you something to look at. So the statistics form you're looking at is the next chart that's on there. So this chart is taken directly from the WISE LR redistricting software, which is a statewide software that everyone uses. It assigns populations, determines deviations to make sure that we are staying within our target population, which there is degrees of variance in those. That's because people live in different areas of the county. Going forward after that is the municipal war description. So broken down by townships, villages, and cities. So after you've determined the supervisory districts, which you did in September, then we went to work and had all the municipalities look at their ward plans and then determine their ward plans. So what you're looking at here is the legal description of all the boundaries, so you can clearly define where wards are and things like that. So that's what the rest of this document has this all the way through there for all those municipalities within the county. So again, this is meant to be an overview. This does have the boundaries on there, but individual maps can be printed as they need. The last thing that's in this document is the ordinance that I'm proposing we pass for the redistricting. So I won't read that yet until we're done, but nonetheless, it does have all the supervisory districts, which 21 was the number that we were going to maintain, right? And then it has all in each of those districts, the description of what, municipality or governing body is in there, the population for each of those units, and then the population for each district. So that is what's in this final plan packet. I will stop there and let Mr. Chair Frank carry on, and I can add what I need to.
Thank you. Derek, I'd also like you to mention about the ordinances that you sent out to the different, and what you did with that, please.
Absolutely, sir. So to streamline this process, because we were under a severe time crunch, I don't need to say this again because you probably heard it before, but this 6-month process was done in about a month and a half, which is incredibly difficult to do if I'm being completely honest. But nonetheless, to make this flow as seamless as we could, I did reach out to all the municipalities, so the one city, the villages, and the townships, provided them with the ordinances or the resolutions, however they defined it at their jurisdiction, to be able to take to their boards and pass. So Lynn worked very hard on getting the legal descriptions for all these municipalities ready. The city did their own, but we did spend a lot of time working together as a unit because we're all kind of in this together at the end of the day, and it's a plan that we as a county have to adopt. So we did feed, I did provide that information to the town clerks, villages and the cities to assist them as much as I possibly could, because this is only done once every 10 years. So, you know, things change in 10 years, and to be the best resource I could for them, I did provide them that. So they all received these once, the tentative plan was approved and adopted, they did receive these.
A point of order here. I think to discuss this, we should have a resolution before us. And if you would read that resolution there, and then we'll get it on the table.
Sure.
Before us.
Absolutely. This will be ordinance number 21-28, and it's an ordinance reapportioning supervisory districts according to the 2020 census data. Pursuant to Wisconsin statute section 5903, and after public hearing, the County Board of Supervisors of the County of Richland does hereby ordain as follows, and does hereby adopt the following final supervisory district plan. The Board of Supervisors of Richland County shall consist of 21 supervisors to be elected from supervisory districts, which are hereby created, numbered, and described as follows. So again, there's the list. Would you like me to read them all, Mr. Brewer?
No,
Okay.
but let's have a motion now and get this before us. Mr. McKee, seconded by Mr. Cosgrove. All right, now we have the motion and the resolution is before us. And now we'll get to the questions, or perhaps Mr. Frank has more explaining to do.
Thank you. Just another point, Derek, how many of those did you receive back from the different districts? And if you could mention that some did not have to come back because they were single units.
So all municipalities that were required to return an ordinance to us based on the composition of their body did return those to me. There were 3 townships that did not return those to me, but also based on your population and the number of wards you have, some of them didn't have to do anything. So a lot of townships that only have 1 ward and a population of less than 1,000, which is all of us, basically all the townships, they didn't have to return anything. I requested they did as a way to just increase this transparency and accountability with this process. So in 3 years from now, there was no question that they didn't know, or that, you know, that no one, just to make sure everyone was aware. So everyone did return something that had to. Otherwise, if they didn't, we would have had to move this to a special meeting to approve it.
All right, thank you.
I'm gonna pass the gavel to the vice chair here and let him handle this. Mr. Vice Chair, may I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Mr.
Thank you. Is there any way to tell board members, and I just discovered this, of course, yesterday when I was looking at the map, that I ended up living outside of my district. And I wonder if there's any way to tell other board members if that's true. And I realize that these maps were made without any recognition of where members currently live, and it has to be done that way. I understand that. But I wonder if there's any way, before this body votes on it, to tell them if they're gonna have a problem when they decide to re-up. Thank you.
If I may. So again, the maps were drawn, and one of the guidelines we have is wherever the supervisors were, doesn't matter. We did not put that into the calculation. We did not want that to be part of it. So if you have questions, there is a map, you can look at that. It's in your folder. It's on your iPads. There's a legal description that breaks down the different areas. Officially, that all has to go through, and I'll let Derek touch on that a bit. That has to go through the entire process until the final official map is out. But the guideline is there on the map on your iPads if people want to take a moment to look at that.
Mr. Kalish, do you have any further comment on that?
I do not. When I think Bob summed it up fine, when we were proceeding with doing the maps, one of the rules was not to look at supervisory or addresses of incumbents, and we never looked at that. And so I can't sit here today and say that this isn't gonna happen to anyone else because we just didn't look at that. That wasn't something we did. It was best practice to not do that. So I think that's as simple as it was. We just didn't look at addresses at all, so. And in the software, there's no addresses, it's just census numbers with blocks of, assigned population, so.
Further questions, Mr. Brewer?
Well, just an observation, for the greater good, we should adopt this without much further ado, but, for the greater good, we have a problem populating our county board with the adequate number of supervisors. And it's always a struggle in December, getting people to run. Are you gonna run? Would you run? Are you a candidate? Are you a viable candidate? So in the final analysis here, because Lee and I end up in the same district, Lee Van Landijk, we'll be down a supervisor, potentially, unless someone rises and comes up and will run. So, for the greater good, I wish there weren't any changes there, but that's just me.
Other questions or comments? Yes, Ms. Gentis, go ahead.
Lynn and the zoning officer that you have gotten a map of my district. Because it's really hard to tell from the description exactly. When do you think those maps will be available?
Well, the final ones were going to be available after the final project was approved. But I can supply you a closer look at that if you want to, at any time.
So what do you mean by final when the process is approved?
But the final, passing this tonight, after that, I can get,
So after tonight?
yes,
Okay, that's fine.
okay.
Mr. Seif, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I would like to ask Corporation Counsel, can the county board amend this ordinance, this proposed ordinance for approval?
The county board would have the authority to do so. I would, Clerk Taylor said he didn't have to say it anymore, but I will again. We are under some very strict deadlines. The committee has done fantastic work. Even from the very beginning of the process, he worked very closely with me in developing this timeline. And it's not my place to advise on the function of democracy. So I will just say that the board does have the authority to do so, but be mindful of the fact that there are deadlines that we need to meet.
I understand that, and I want to say that I appreciate, and I'm sure everyone does, the very diligent work that the committee did, and we all appreciate that. They did a very professional job under a lot of time pressure. I have only questions, not criticisms. And I have some concern that the one change involving Henrietta Township and Willow now removes Mr. Brewer from representing the town of Willow and leaves that vacant at present without representation and places him in the town of Henrietta and forces a contest between himself and Mr. Van Landijk, neither of whom I'm sure want to run against one another. What makes this difficult is that we have two very good board members, one of whom, by virtue of this event, we will lose. One of whom is the very competent leader of the county board. All of this is being done in accordance with the guidelines that have been provided to the committee, and would not suggest that they have not fully complied with those guidelines and tried to perform their duties with integrity and absolute honesty, not recognizing or attempting to identify the addresses of the incumbents. It's just a very unfortunate accident that this happened. It is also somewhat concerning to me that we are in effect removing a representative for the Willow District without the citizens of Willow having any say in it. We're taking that choice away. It has been argued that there may be a perception, should we offer an amendment to reverse that decision, there has been a suggestion that somehow the board is manipulating the system so that two existing board members can retain their positions. That is a matter that is not up to us to decide, but up to the voters. And it's up to these candidates to justify their decision to contest. Now, the final thing that I would like to say, and I'm sorry that I can't be more brief. They say that brevity is the wit of the soul. I'm not so sure about my soul. You know, I can't be brief. And the matter of wit is in question. But the piece of territory that we're talking about is this. The territory of the town of Henrietta has been extended southward to include a sliver divided by two parallel pieces of highway, some of which, and I may be exaggerating, but if you have a good arm, aren't much more than a stone throw away from one another. But by accident of that extension, Mr. Brewer, the chair, who half of his property is in Willow and the other part is now would now be in Henrietta, his house is on the side of the street where Henrietta is. I know that his business office is across the street because I've been in it. And so I think that the possibility of leaving the other position vacant and placing these two very competent board members in a contest against one another, and I know there's no animosity or would not be any animosity between them, but it has the potential of dividing the community. One candidate is in the extreme south end of the district and very familiar with his present constituency. The other incumbent is in the extreme north end of the district, and he's very familiar with his community. But neither are very familiar with their potential constituents should this be changed. I think it's a matter of common sense. The county board has the authority. The guidelines are just that. They're guidelines. They're not statutory mandates. I have absolutely no criticism of the committee in bringing this ordinance forward with the lines being drawn with the way they are. Where the deviation in the population is not as significant as the as the numbers of citizens in my own township compared to the township of Henrietta. Now, it was also stated that there were 41 folks in that residents in that little piece of territory on Highway D and Double D from the top of the hill down to 80. And I think it is true that there are probably 41 residents. As I drove down that road, I had my wife count the homes on D from the top of the hill to Highway 80. And on the left side of the road, there are only 4 residents. There are probably 41 on the whole circle. But I would like to suggest that the population itself consists of almost a majority, nearly half, who, because of their very sincere religious convictions, do not vote. I think that's a matter to be considered. This is not the most extreme deviation in the numbers between one township and another, if you look over the list. I would offer an amendment to reverse or revise the decision to place Mr. Brewer back in the Willow District by, again, moving the line back to County Highway D and keeping Mr. Van Landite as the county board member in Henrietta, and Mr. Brewer as the representative of Rockbridge and Willow. This is not to say that they may each have an opponent or a candidate for the position, and they might still even no longer be with us. But at least we are not responsible for the dilemma. We leave it to the voters to decide. They should have a say. I thank you for listening to me, and I apologize for my loquaciousness.
Mr. Seep is suggesting an amendment. Is this a motion to amend, Mr. Seep?
Correct.
We have a motion to amend. Do we have a second? Second from Mr. McKee. Discussion on the amendment.
Mr. Chair, I feel it's appropriate to jump in and just make one correction. The redistricting maps that we'd be voting on tonight do not take effect until the next election. And so I just want to be perfectly clear that if they were to go through in their current form, we would not be removing any currently elected officials from their position. We would merely be changing the grounds upon which they run for re-election, should they choose to do so. I just wanted to make that differentiation clear.
Excellent clarification. Thank you.
May I comment? I'm sorry, Mr. Wendell, I perhaps misspoke. I intended to suggest that this would be effective beginning the next session.
Other discussion, Mr. Van Landijk.
I'd like to respectfully make a suggestion. If you take the maps that are here in front of you on these screens, what's going to be added to the 3rd district, which I currently represent? I moved south from D to double D. Is that little piece that's added? And I also gained that area between 80 and PR. Number of people that are there, I'm wondering if that would be similar to the number that would be in that area, northern Rockbridge Township. I don't know what the name of that road is, but there's a red line below. There's the BR below. What's right above it? know it as well as I know my own name, and I can't recall what
Are
it
you
is.
talking about Double D, Highway County?
Is that double D there?
Might be Ross's Road.
No, it goes all the way from double D over to 80. And above it is that orange piece just south. There's Blood Lane in there. You see what I'm talking about?
That's County D. You're talking.
Is that County D that goes
Yeah,
across?
County D.
Well, what I'd suggest is take those two pieces out. Marty Brewer resides currently in that area of BR. If those were to be removed and leave mine at D, and then run it across D all the way up, that would be a more, smoother baseline for me. And that would get Marty on the board. And I think if you look at that population wise, they are both similar size. My guess it would be similar in population as well. So I would respectfully ask people to maybe consider taking that portion out of the northwestern part of Rockbridge, add it to mine, and replace what's below D and BR to the Willow. You understand what I'm trying to suggest here?
Mr. Vice Chair.
Yes.
There is a motion on the floor.
Yes, there is. That's
discussing it,
Cincinnati Gas Corporation Council. We already have a motion for an amendment on the floor. Is this suggestion consistent with that, or is this a separate motion we need to discuss?
Believe the intent is to be consistent with revision, so that.
This would be a prospective way of accomplishing the purpose of the amendment.
Correct, if
Okay.
I'm understanding the suggestion correctly.
Okay. And for Mr. Seep, with your motion to amend, does this sound consistent with your ears with your motion?
Yeah.
Okay, and Mr. McKee, you had seconded? Okay.
Mr. Vice Chair, or?
Yes, Mr. Murphy Lopez, go ahead.
So one concern I have about doing this on the floor is that there has been no evaluation across the entire county board to see where people live. And if this amendment passes, then what if there are other people who are currently on the county board who are redistricted into neighboring districts, and we don't know about those right now? Because people not everyone on the county board has been able to look at these maps in enough detail. Second concern I have, and why I won't support the amendment, is because what Mr. Van Landijk is talking about is something that's in District 5, which is Richard McKee's current district. Now, the population staying within that 10% deviation, I think I understand what Supervisor Van Landijk is trying to do, but it could mess with the population in ways that he's not seeing right now. And that was what staff was trying to do. They were trying to stay within that 10% of the ideal population for every district. So I don't think that if this amendment passes, I don't think that it could mess with those other things. And then the third thing is the guidelines that we discussed at the redistricting committee. There's been a lot of talk in the past few years about gerrymandering. We passed something about gerrymandering to go to the voters. Voters overwhelmingly wanted a fair process. Not considering the incumbent is definitely a developing thing to be more fair, so that we definitely haven't interviewed, every county board member. Are you running next time or not? Should we redraw the lines based on your intentions for next time? So I think this amendment kind of opens up a whole can of worms. So that's why I won't support it.
Thank you. Mr. Frank?
Thank you. So in going over this, we have had 2 public meetings. Both those meetings were open. These are the same maps that were available at those public meetings. The first time this came up was here at the last redistricting meeting yesterday. We intentionally did not include supervisors where they live exactly for this reason. This was done to create the lines regardless of who it is. This is not a plan for 1 year, for one election. This is a plan for the next 10 years. And I will not support the amendment because it's going to start altering and changing what our original guidelines were that we set when we brought before the county board at the last meeting. I read them to you as to what we were doing and what the plan was, and no one objected. I will not support the amendment. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond?
Yes, Mr. Seat, go ahead.
And I thank you, Mr. Frank, and I thank the whole committee, and we're not here to criticize the committee, but the issue here is this. If the county board tonight passes this amendment and passes the ordinance, that's the end of it. It's in effect for the next 10 years. If you have other county board members here tonight who have objections, I haven't heard them. And so it's not a serious matter here. We're just talking about amendment in a small sliver. You could do it separately from Mr. Van Landijk's suggestion, because the degree of deviation here is less than it is when you compare other townships. The percentage of deviation. You have been very diligent in trying to keep all of those pretty well balanced and in line. But there are some that are 50, 60 points almost in deviation, in the percentage of in deviation. All we're suggesting here is kind of a common sense thing here. Why should we by happenstance and almost by accident, not knowing, and we appreciate very much that the committee operated with integrity and did not look at different incumbents to see what their address was. That's fine. But now this has happened by unhappy accident. You have the potential of losing one of two fine leaders, one of whom is the county board chair. Now, it's true you might lose them if they have contestants if you pass this amendment.
Mr. Seat, you're not covering any new territory here, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying to respond to Mr. Frank, and I want you to know that I'm not being critical at all. I'm
I
trying to
understand that.
So,
Mr. Chair, if I could make,
Yes, sir.
if I could just make one clarification. While the population and the deviation therefrom is one of the statutory requirements in determining these wards, the reason that there is such a wide variance in population is because in adjusting the wards, we have one unit to work with, which is a census block. So, while it would be lovely for us to be able to take a discrete geographic area and modify it, the fact is that, and I'll ask you to step in if I'm speaking incorrectly, we can't do that. We can't simply take a number of residences or an area. We have to operate within an entire census block. And so if we move one area over, even if the population is relatively small in terms of sheer numbers, that would then potentially have a domino effect in that an adjacent ward to the adjusted ward may then have to be adjusted, so on and so forth. And so if we are going to be doing this in accordance with statute, if the amendment were passed tonight, what would need to happen is that the intent of the amendment would need to go back. That would need to go back through the system to ensure that we maintain those variances throughout all of the adjacent areas. And so the board should be aware of that in deliberating their support for the amendment, is that it's not simply moving a couple people over for these purposes.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Yes, Mr. Van Landijk.
Point. Am I on?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Frank, got the numbers to these things. Numbers question. Number of people that How does that compare with what's the just area that I talked about? Are they
Leave.
similar?
Mic, you're not holding the mic right.
Am I on now? Oh, I hear me. What I'm simply looking for is numbers. I'm sure you've got all the maps there. The two areas that were added to mine between BR 80 and below D to double D, how does that compare with the area above D and double D above near Rockbridge? Are they similar?
I don't have those numbers right with me. Garrett, do you have those?
No, these districts were put together as a compilation of numbers, so how each piece of puzzle fits into that individual total, I don't know that. What I do know is if you look at the supervisory district statistics, that gives you the numbers, and that was really what our guideline was in this, to determine the 5% deviation above or below the goal target. So no, Leah, I don't have, I mean, we didn't break it down that far, right? That wasn't what we needed to do.
But knowing that area fairly well, it seems to me that the people would be similar. And even though this is very exact in process, it's kind of arbitrary in some ways. If we were to just consider that, that's all I'm asking. So
Supervisor Carroll in the back.
gentlemen, I really appreciate your time, your effort, and I guess I didn't realize this until this evening. I'd seen the maps, it was so muddy, it was hard to see, but I see it here. So I'll be done. Thank you.
Supervisor Carroll.
Yes. Corporate counsel answered part of my question, but my question is, if we did pass this amendment tonight, what are the steps would need to be done? And can they all be done before the deadline? I don't know what the deadline is, and I don't know what all the incremental steps are to make it official. So can we even do it in time?
In theory, anything is possible. I believe that we would have sufficient time to do that, but in doing so, I'm also going to scooch a little bit away from Clerk Kalish because I would be signing him up for a couple sleepless nights. What would need to happen is we would need to target what we want in terms of the geographic area, determine how they fit in terms of the census block, make sure that those are properly allocated to achieve the desired outcome here, and then rerun that against all of the other existing maps and allocations to ensure that all other areas remain within that statutory required deviation. It might be a little bit of a simplification, but it's not entirely incorrect to say that we would have to start over. We're not starting in square one necessarily, but maybe square one and a third. And so it would be an arduous process, and I would have serious concern. It would likely involve a special meeting of the board to revisit the new final plan that would come out of that, which is, we got to do what we got to do, but just to be aware of that as well. So it is feasible, but the timeline that we've been operating under, the timeline that says we vote on this tonight, was developed to maximize the amount of time that we had to do this while still ensuring a safe cushion to meeting statutory and I'll say constitutional concerns in terms of getting this process done and these maps in place in time for electoral concerns.
If I could make a comment, Mr. Rice. Mr. Severson first, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Severson.
Waiting for my comment for a little later after this, but to the citizens of Richland County, when we're talking about this, it's gerrymandering at its finest. However, I want you to pay real close attention to what I'm going to say here. So if you are in a district and your property is divided by the line, by a road, and you have an office on one side and a house on the other side, it doesn't matter where you hang your head at night. What matters is that your district, that your address is within that district. So if you can critical think here, doesn't matter where you sleep at night. If you have an office that's in that district, make your address there.
Mr. Langley. I was just going to comment, from the discussion that we're having in place in here and advice from council as well as the folks that worked on the plan, resolution on the floor to include that census block, kind of pushing it into District 6 off the floor seems less advisable than if the county board is not satisfied with the plan that is brought forward, to recommend it to go back to committee with advice on trying to develop another plan to incorporate the mentioned census block into District 6. Does that sound like a more digestible plan than trying to amend it directly off the floor?
Absolutely. And in practical terms, that's exactly what would have to happen.
Does that still leave us with time crunches and special meeting considerations and things like that?
Absolutely.
Any further discussion on the amendment that's currently before us?
Wasn't
Mr. Williams.
Please.
Mr. Williamson had his hand up.
I just wondered, if we were to do this, we don't know the repercussions. It may affect me, it may affect Gary, because they're gonna have everything that they've done to make sense. So,
That is a possibility.
let's vote on the amendment, but I will support it as well.
Anybody else? Mr. Van Linde, I'll come back to you, but I want to give anybody else a chance first. Anybody else speak to the amendment?
I would like to make a final point.
Briefly, Mr. Seat, then we'll go back to Mr. Van Linde.
I merely would like to say that, and I'm sure that Mr. Lindell will agree, if we pass this amendment tonight, it is perfectly legal. And if that is the decision of the board, that has authority, legal authority. Am I correct?
Yes, and I apologize if I gave the impression that I was advocating one way or another, but the board is the one with the ultimate decision-making authority in this matter.
All right, thank you. Mr. Van Linden.
I just wanted to have Mr. Langrick reiterate what it is that he had suggested. We've covered a bit of territory here, and I'm not quite exactly sure what he was suggesting.
The suggestion was to refer it back to committee, but first we have this amendment to deal with. And so depending on the outcome of the vote on the amendment, perhaps that will influence the later discussion of Mr. Langrick's suggestion. Okay.
Call for the question.
All right, we will vote on the proposed amendment to this resolution, and a roll call has been requested.
The amendment to the ordinance presented before you, Carroll,
No.
Murphy Lopez,
No.
Van Landuit,
Yes.
Seaton,
Yeah.
McKee, Brewer,
Yes.
Luck,
No.
Manning, Gotcho,
No.
Glassbrenner,
No,
Rudersdorf, Gentis,
no,
Turk,
No.
Cosgrove, Frank,
No.
Severson,
Negative.
Williamson,
No.
Cooey.
No.
Ness,
No.
Call, McGuire.
No.
Okay, with 4 yeses to amend and the rest knows the motion does not fail, or the motion does not pass, motion to amend does not pass.
Okay, so the amendment has been voted down. We're back to the original resolution. Any further discussion on the original resolution? Mr. Severson?
Illish, when people who are interested in applying or running for a county board seat, and they put their address down, what do you look for when they put their address down? Where they sleep at night?
I go to the Wisconsin Elections Commission site, which takes the information. So this information is ultimately from LTSB, and this YSLR system is ultimately loaded into the Wisconsin Elections Commission after a few process. I personally don't check residences because I'm not a municipal clerk. So that is done at the municipal level, not at the county level. When county supervisors do submit papers to me for nomination, I go to the Wisconsin Elections Commission site. WisVote, My Vote, you're all familiar, or My Vote, some of you probably are familiar with, but counties and municipalities have access to WisVote, which is where we record election information, and that's where I go to check addresses.
So no good change their address they move it to somewhere where their address is within that voting district, correct?
Of course, people can move wherever they'd like to. I can't control that.
They can also sleep anywhere that they want to, right?
Beyond my jurisdiction.
Okay.
Other questions or comments related to the original resolution?
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd
Mr.
like
Steve.
to thank the board members and the districting committee for giving us the time to present this dialogue.
Thank you. Other questions? Ready to vote on the original resolution? All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The resolution is adopted.
It's, yes,
Mr. Cooey, was that a yes or a no you vote?
Yes.
With the adoption of that, I'll pass the gavel back to Chair Burton.
Thank you. An ordinance amending ordinance number 89-7 relating to the Richland County Sheriff's Department, Mr. Kalish.
This will be ordinance number 21-29. Now therefore be it resolved, the Richland County Board of Supervisors does hereby ordain as follows. The Richland County Sheriff's Department ordinance number 89-7, which was adopted on June 21 of 1989, is amended to date, is hereby further amended as follows. The following paragraph is hereby added immediately after section 4C4 of said ordinance. Any person who vacates a position of chief deputy in 2021 to become sheriff of Richland County shall be deemed to be on unpaid leave of absence from the chief deputy position. This leave of absence shall be for a period not to exceed 2 years from the date on which the person becomes sheriff. A person returning to the position of chief deputy, shall displace any person who then holds that position unless the sheriff removes the returning chief deputy under 89-7-4E, at which time the returning chief deputy would return to his former position with the department with all earned benefit time intact. This ordinance shall be effective as of August 17th of 2021 and is being offered to you by members of the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you. What's your pleasure on the ordinance?
Chairman,
Mr. Cosgrove, seconded by Frank. Sorry, Mr. Seep, you're behind this speaker here. I can't see you. Should be able to hear you. Okay, we have the ordinance is on the floor. Discussion, questions? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of this ordinance signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ordinance is adopted. Resolution approving amendments to two 2021 contracts for the Department of Health and Human Services. Did I miss something?
Number 15.
Resolution recognizes, the retirement of an employee of the county treasurer's office. How could I forget that? I was at the party. So,
All right, this will be resolution number 21-137. Now therefore be it resolved by the Richland County Board of Supervisors that the county board hereby expresses its sincere appreciation to Ms. Julie Keller for over 32 years of dedicated service in the treasurer's office. And be it further resolved that the county board wishes Ms. Keller a long and happy retirement. And be it further resolved that the county clerk shall send a copy of this resolution to Ms. Keller at her residence. This resolution is being offered to you by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
you've heard the resolution. What's your pleasure? Mr. Williamson, seconded by Mrs. Ruderstone. And all those in favor of this heartfelt resolution signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? It is adopted. Now we get to a resolution approving amendments to two 2021 contracts for the Department of Health and Human Services. Mr. Kalish.
This will be resolution number 21-138. Now therefore be it resolved by the Richland County Board of Supervisors that approval is hereby granted for the following amendment to the following two 2021 contracts with Fond du Lac County of Fond du Lac, with the original contract being $49,500 and the amendment being for an additional $100,000 due to an increased need for group home services to a child being served by the Child and Youth Services Unit. Number two, with Vista Care of Sheboygan, with the original contract being $730,000 and the amendment being for $840,000 due to an increased need for adult family home residential services to an individual being served by the Behavioral Health Services Unit. Be it further resolved that the Health and Human Services Board is hereby authorized to amend the above contracts by not more than 15%, and be it further resolved that the Director of Health and Human Services Board is hereby authorized to sign the above contracts on behalf of the county in accordance with this resolution, and be it further resolved that this resolution shall be effective immediately upon its passage and publication. This resolution is being offered to you by the county board members of the Health and Human Services Board.
Thank you. When you've heard the resolution, what's your pleasure? Mr. Nelson makes the motion, and we need a second, Mr. McKee. And Tracy Thorson is on the floor. If you have questions, she has two more resolutions here. No questions? All right, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is adopted. Number 17, a resolution approving the 2022 Health and Human Services Revenue Contracts. Mr. Taylor.
This will be resolution number 21-139. Now therefore be it resolved by the Richland County Board of Supervisors that approval is hereby granted for the Health and Human Services Board to enter into the following revenue contracts for 2022. You all have those contracts in front of you. I won't read through each one unless Mr. Chair, you would like me to.
No.
Okay. Be it further resolved that the Health and Human Services Board is hereby authorized to amend any of the above contracts by not more than 15%. Be it further resolved that the Director of Health and Human Services Department, Ms. Tracy Thorson, is hereby authorized to sign the above contracts on behalf of Richland County in accordance with this resolution. Be it further resolved that this resolution shall be effective immediately upon its passage and publication. This resolution is being offered to you by the County Board Supervisor members of the Health and Human Services Board.
You've heard the resolution. What's your pleasure? This is called and seconded by Mr. Van Lindert. And Tracy is back there. She stayed late to take your questions if you have any. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The resolution is adopted. A resolution approving the 2022 to 2024 Richland County Aging Plan. Mr. Kalish.
No, this is resolution, we're on 18, Marty. Resolution approving
Okay.
2022 provider contracts for the Health and Human Services Department.
Okay, Mr. Kalish, thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead and read that one,
Okay,
please.
resolution number 21-140. Now therefore be it resolved by the Richland County Board of Supervisors that approval is hereby granted for the Health and Human Services Board to enter into the following provider contracts for 2020. Have an extensive list of contracts there. Would you like me to read them, Mr. Chair?
No, thank you.
Be it further resolved that the Health and Human Services Board is hereby authorized to amend any of the above contracts by not more than 15%. Be it further resolved that the Director of Health and Human Services Department, Ms. Tracy Thorson, is hereby authorized to sign the above contracts on behalf of Richland County in accordance with this resolution. And be it further resolved that this resolution shall be effective immediately upon its passage and publication. This is being offered to you by the county board members of the Health and Human Services Board.
You've heard the resolution. What's your pleasure? Mrs. Rudolph, seconded by Mrs. Glassbrenner. Discussion, questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The resolution is adopted. Now, we can get to the 2022-2024 aging plan. Mr. Kalish.
All right, this will be resolution number 21-141. Now therefore be it resolved by the Richland County Board of Supervisors of the 2022 to 2024 Richland County Aging Plan, a copy of which is on file in the county clerk's office, is hereby approved. Be it further resolved that this resolution shall be effective immediately upon its passage and publication. This is again being offered to you by the County Board Supervisor members of the Health and Human Services Board. There was a copy of this plan attached with this resolution, so you should all have that.
And what's your pleasure? You've heard the resolution. What's your pleasure? Mr. McKee, Mr. Gotchel seconds. Any questions for Tracy? Standing right there. Mr. Carroll.
Just wondered if there were any significant changes.
I guess I would say that generally the aging plan hasn't changed substantially, although some of the priorities in terms of how the transportation program may be expanded to try to
make sure that people have access to the meal sites is one of the priorities, and that certainly was not in the previous plan. Also, some work on the nutrition program to look at some additional models in addition to the meal sites, where there may be the creation of a voucher program or a restaurant model, where that would be another option for people to access meals. I believe those were the major changes.
Thank you. All right, all those in favor of the 22-24 Richland County Aging Plan signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution is adopted. Number 20, resolution approving Richland County's participation in a state program providing specialized transportation assistance. Mr. Kalish.
This will be resolution number 21-142. Now therefore be it resolved by the Richland County Board of Supervisors that the Richland County Department of Health and Human Services and its director are hereby authorized to prepare and submit to the Wisconsin Department of Transportation an application for assistance during the 2022 under Wisconsin statute section 85.21 in accordance with the requirements issued by the Department of Transportation, and the county board also authorizes the obligation of county funds in the amount needed in order to provide the required local match. And be it further resolved that a sum of not less than $15,978 of the amount budgeted for transportation funds for the Department of Health and Human Services Transportation Account in 2022 Richland County budget shall be used as the approximately 20% matching county share portion of this program for specialized transportation assistance with county contribution will enable Richland County to receive the $79,889 grant, which has been allocated to Richland County for 2022 by the Wisconsin Department of Transportation in accordance with Wisconsin State Statute Section 85.21. Be it further resolved that the Director of the Department of Health and Human Services, Ms. Tracy Thorson, is hereby authorized to execute a state aid contract with the Wisconsin Department of Transportation under Wisconsin Statute Section 85.21 on behalf of Richland County. Be it further resolved that this resolution shall be effective immediately upon its passage and publication. This is being offered to you by the County Board Supervisor members of the HHS Board.
You've heard the resolution. What's your pleasure? Mr. Nelson, seconded by Mrs. Glassgunner. This is something we do all the time, isn't it? Every year. Mr. McGuire has a question.
Quickly, can I get a quick definition of specialized? What does that cover? Just
I'll defer then to Director Thorson to answer that question.
Is the question specialized in the title of the grant? Is that what you're asking?
what the different forms of specialized.
That includes the transportation that we're able to provide people who are in wheelchairs to get to and from appointments. We also operate the volunteer driver program so that individuals can get to medical appointments and may need assistance in and out of the facilities.
Thank you. Good, are you good, Jen? Okay. Anyone else? Hearing no further questions, I'll ask for a vote on this. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution is adopted. Number 21. And goodbye, Tracy, you can go now. So hit the road. Be careful of the deer. A resolution approving the Land Conservation Committee applying for and accepting a lake monitoring and protection grant from the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. Derek.
This will be resolution number 21-143. Now therefore be it resolved by the Richland County Board of Supervisors that approval is hereby granted for the Land Conservation Committee to apply for a lake monitoring and protection grant from the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources in the amount of up to $9,578 to pay for staff time and supplies for aquatic invasive species projects in the county. And be it further resolved that the Richland County Land Conservation Department will meet the financial obligations necessary to fully and satisfactorily complete the project, and hereby authorize and empowers the following employees to submit the following documents to the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources for financial assistance. that may be available. The county conservationist can submit the following: sign and submit a grant application, enter into a grant agreement with the DNR, submit quarterly and or final reports to the DNR to satisfy the grant agreement. As appropriate, submit reimbursement requests to the DNR no later than the date specified in the grant agreement. Be it further resolved that there is no county match required for this grant, and approval is hereby granted for the grant funds to be spent in accordance with the terms of the grant, and the county conservationist, Ms. Kathy Cooper, is hereby authorized to sign on behalf of the county any documents needed to carry out this resolution. Be it further resolved that the applicant will comply with all local, state, and federal rules, regulations, and ordinances relating to the project and the cost share agreement. Be it further resolved that the resolution shall be effective immediately upon its passage and publication. This is being offered to you by the county board supervisor members of the Land Conservation Committee.
Thank you. For the resolution, Mr. Manning makes the motion, seconded by
I'll second.
Gentis.
No question.
Can't see you. Do we have a question, Jess? Go ahead, let's proceed.
Yes, I'd like to ask Ms. Cooper, what lake is being monitored?
I don't believe she's here.
Anyone from the land
I think
conservation?
Mr. Frank has an answer.
Yeah, so that's not just lakes, that's any waterways. It says lakes, it's waterways, so it's invasive species. There's gonna be some training they're gonna do at the kayak sites and the canoe sites as to how to maintain, how to clean, how to take care of your watercraft, your kayaks, boats, or whatever, to prevent transferring invasive species from one body of water to another.
It's a little confusing than the term lakes.
Yeah, that is how the grant comes out, is the term lakes. It's actually waterways.
Okay. All those in favor of this resolution indicate by saying aye. Aye. The resolution is adopted. A resolution approving a new collective bargaining agreement with the Richland County Sheriff Association, WPPA, the union. Mr. Kaylee.
This will be resolution number 21-144. Now therefore be it resolved that the Richland County Board of Supervisors hereby approves the 3-year collective bargaining agreement between the county and the union, and authorizes the county administrator to finalize said agreement, and the Finance and Personnel Committee to sign said agreement on behalf of the county. This resolution is being offered to you by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Seat. Do we have a second, Mr. Van Landijk? And I guess we ought to have some details of that contract, like perhaps for the board. So I see that Sheriff Porter is back here. Maybe, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, I can certainly speak to the details, if I could order my computer. But, has anybody reviewed the resolution, have any questions regarding that?
Well, I think if you can just give us the amounts and when and
3-year contract, 3% raise each year. The union came forward with a number of suggestions, some that have been adopted in this contract, which I think will benefit the department as well. One being a reduced rate of pay for people if we send them to the academy, which is probably going to be something that's going to have to be a reality here soon, where we're going to have to hire people who are not certified. So they proposed that. There were some other things that they had proposed that I think will be of a benefit to the department as well. Like if we do send somebody to the academy, their probation period doesn't start until they actually come to us and start working, where we can actually start evaluating them. And then there was some language cleanup regarding updating committee names, stuff like that. Some changes in holiday pay prior to this contract. If a deputy was to work on a holiday, they would get paid for the 8.5 hours at holiday rate pay. If they worked beyond 8.5 hours, it reverted back to 1.5. They no longer got holiday pay. So if you ended up working a 12-hour or longer shift on a holiday, you only got holiday pay for 8.5.
yeah, thank you. The process was amiable and productive, so everyone participated. Mr. McGuire.
Yes, Mr. Porter, in the past, you've had to pay the total cost of the academy for these candidates, and that was, what, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000?
So the cost for the academy, if we're to send somebody to the academy, if we sponsor a recruit in the academy, the cost is covered by the Department of Justice. The only time we would incur the cost, if that person was not to successfully complete the academy.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Frank,
Sheriff Porter, a quick question. Item number 19 says, provided that cadets may be hired at 75% of the rates of the wage schedule. What are cadets?
Essentially what we're looking at right there was recruits. So if we're hiring them and sending them to the recruit academy, they would get 75% of, I believe it was step A in the union wage schedule.
thank you. Any other questions? Okay. I'll entertain a vote on the resolution to approve the new collective bargaining agreement. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion for the resolution is adopted. Number 23, appointments to various boards, commissions, and committees. Mr. Langrick.
Mr. Chair, we have none tonight.
Thank you. Administrators report.
Mr. Chair, if I can add just a few more minutes, I've got one item for you that may spark interest as it will impact how we organize ourselves going forward into the next session. I'm going to go through this rather quickly, but the main takeaway from this is please stay in tune to your rules and resolutions committee will be handling this on your behalf. Report today for proposed changes to committees and boards, commissions, assignments. Essentially, the package that I'm putting together and working with this committee includes 4 major items. It's the categorizing and defining of our committee, boards, and commissions. Number 2, restructuring the committee on committees from an elected to an appointed body. Number 3, vacancy appointments during the session. And number 4, several changes to committee, boards, commissions, purposes, and structures. The first item on this is, you may be familiar with this document. I'm sorry, it gets rather small, but on the left-hand side is your current kind of roster that you track all of your committee, boards, and commissions. It's available to you on your website. We're looking to kind of bolster this into a little bit more of a robust product that does a little bit more to capture not only the people that are assigned to it, but the overall purpose of the body in a broad statement, how it's established, if the body was established by resolution or if it's established by state statute or ordinance or some form like that, the responsible secretary for the committee, commission, or board, and then how that is established. Most of them are established by Chapter 59, appointed by the county clerk to produce minutes that can be filed. The number of members of the body, the maximum length that they can serve on that body, whether or not bonding is required, how they are appointed to that body, and then if confirmation is needed. So with this also then includes taking all of your bodies and breaking them down into the different categories. As you'll see on here, the title on this one is your standing committees. Right now, they're all kind of included on a roster that runs alphabetically. The proposal is to break that down into 5 separate rosters that captures your elected bodies, your standing committees, your commissions, your subcommittees, and then your seats that you have on our partner organizations. So that's kind of the first aspect of it, and it's important that you understand that we're also then we're kind of confirming the standing committees versus commissions, because that entails kind of on how they're appointed. If they're appointed by a county board chair and confirmed by the board, or if they're appointed by an administrator and confirmed by the board. The second aspect of it is restructuring your committee on committees. As many of you know, the current formation of your committee on committees is that you are elected at the organizational meeting. You convene then at a later date to decide on committees. The proposal going forward is that that body transitions to an appointed by a chair organization. You stand up that same night, and then you're also then assigning seats then to the standing committees and the chairs that same night. And again, that's the standing committees, and also the chairs for your standing committees are then appointed that same night. The reason for this is it kind of empowers the chairs, set priorities, expectations, etc. It would be a proposed change then to also change that from a 7-person to a 5-person, again, for purposes of advisory. The purpose of the body then is to make, as it is right now, is to make recommendations to the board for committee seats. It is advised that in the future, then it becomes an advisory to the county board chair. for placement on the seats, placement for the standing committee for the seats and the chairs. And then when do they form? Right now, your organizational meeting, and then anytime an appointment is needed, we have to get a committee of committees together to make the recommendations to the county board. In the future, it's seen that they'll be put together at the organizational meeting, and then from thereafter, when there is a new standing committee that is formed. To help kind of manage that, because a lot of the responsibilities then shift from committee on committees to who you elect as your chair, and then who your chair appoints as the committee on committees as a sounding board. We're looking to bolster then at the beginning of a session what your preferences are, with a refined preference sheet that is solicited out to each members. So it's capturing kind of the top 5 assignments that you would like to have, and the least 5, and then if you're willing to chair those standing committees. Kind of how the vision is then is that who you're appointing as your chair prior to that meeting is working with the administrator on arriving at a matrix to try to fill the 116 seats that have to be kind of filled going forward into the next session. And then this is kind of, would be used by the sounding board for the committee on committees to review, and then presented to this body for adoption. The other items that are proposed to be changing is vacancy of appointments during sessions, as kind of as we talked about, versus putting a committee on committees together. Vacancies would be filled by appointment by the chair or by the administrator based on the state statutes and brought forward to the county board for confirmation. And then there is also several changes proposed to the committee on committees, boards, commissions regarding purposes and structures. Some of those include a separation of your current Veterans Committee and Veterans Commission, as well as language changes regarding the purpose and responsibilities. So why are we doing this? I kind of gave a lecture and a little bit of a preaching kind of a sermon to rules and resolutions. You can look back on that if you would like. It's hosted on the website, but essentially from what you can gather from our condition of the county is we're approaching it's a bit of a cliff, but we're approaching the extent on which we can use any type of a fund balance to kind of maintain our services. And we know going forward into the next financial budget that we're going to have to prioritize. So some of this then arrives at kind of almost picking a leader with a direction versus us getting pulled in every direction to meet the continued services that we have. So I visualize this as kind of a cultural shift for this body, for this organization. When you hit the April session, your county board chair, if these changes are in place, are going to have a little bit more centered kind of an influence on who's going to be placed on a committee, who's going to be established as the chair of that committee, potentially move political priorities and agenda items to try to get us in a position so we can match budget. So that's kind of really what it's boiling down to. It's going to be kind of a shift in influence. Where rather than we're being pulled in all 360 degrees, we're going to be arriving at electing a chair, electing a vice, having them sort out committee assignments, chair assignments, with almost like a political agenda to decide where our focus is going to be and arriving at our budget priorities. So that's kind of a nutshell on it. Looking for your feedbacks to myself, to rules and resolutions. Want to encourage folks to look back on that last meeting, the recording, to kind of understand the details on it. And then please solicit information to myself, to Chair Sean Murphy Lopez regarding this as we try to shape this going forward. Something that doesn't have to go forward. It can stop and we can status quo it. But again, knowing the financial situation we're arriving at, this is kind of seen as another way to structure ourselves to be able to make some very tough decisions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Langridge. These are fundamental changes in the way we do things, not profound, but fundamental. And I would really beg you to pay attention, look over the last minutes from rules and resolutions and the preaching sermon that Administrator Langridge delivered. And then pay attention because changes are about. Yes, Mrs. Gentes.
Definitely look that over carefully, but do I understand correctly that we will not, as a board, democratically elect committee on committees, that they will be specifically chosen by someone?
That would be
And that would take away all the power that this board has over anything?
Your check on balance remains in establishing a chair and still a confirmation vote on what is brought back to you for committee assignments.
And why are you doing this exactly?
Again, as explained, is we're posturing to make some very big decisions. We're
Well,
going to have to,
what difference does that make for how we do it now?
how we've done it now has led us to where we're at, is kind of what I see.
So you're not pleased with the committee and the chairs?
The committee and the chairs are doing fantastic jobs from their perspectives on it, but trying to balance on what is a priority across the county remains a challenge for us.
I will have to study this. I think this is too much of a change.
Mr. Chair, may I just add one quick comment?
Yes.
So the Rules and Resolutions Committee requested that Mr. Langrick bring this to the full county board at this board meeting, because we didn't want there to be the idea that we were trying to rush any changes through. He brought these changes, these proposals to us in October. We took no action on it except to say that we'd like the whole county board to hear about this. So that's what he was doing tonight. And we encourage anyone like Supervisor Gentis or others who are interested or curious about this to come to the Rules and Resolutions meeting or to contact any of us to share your.
Could you give us the board members who are on Rules and Resolutions?
Absolutely. So it's Don Seep, Melissa Luck, Terry Severson, Chad Cosgrove, and myself.
Thank you. Those are the people, folks. All right. Correspondence, I believe we have some.
I have one item for you, Mr. Chair. We had unfortunate news received from us. Former Highway Commissioner Roger Petrick lost his son last week. In an accident. We have a card in the back that Supervisor Williamson and Cosgrove have. If you're interested in signing that to be passed off to former Commissioner Petrick, please do so.
And David, I believe you have some.
We also received word very recently of the passing of former county board member Larry Jewell. Passed away just a day or so ago, so somewhat related to that, we've been told by numbers of people that the prevalence of COVID in our community is very strong presently, and just to encourage everyone to be very careful and be very careful of the ones you love.
Yes, yes, Mr. Severson.
I have some pleasing correspondence and not some solemn one, but I have a letter from Michael Lee, resident of Richland Township, District 16, stating his intent to help Richland County and Richland County Parks Commission facilitate an easement through his property to gain access to ours. I will submit that to the clerk to have on file.
Well, thank you, Mr. Dean. Mr. Dean is with us tonight. I think he's sat through a couple of these meetings now, maybe more. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that generous offer. And brings us down to adjournment. Anybody want, well, okay. Let's talk about the next meeting. December 14th is our next scheduled meeting, and it's going to take place. We're going to start off with a dinner over at the campus. 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock.
Richland campus?
Yes. At 5 o'clock, and then that'll be followed with a meeting at 7. Now, we're talking about coming back here for the meeting. It would be nice if we could arrange it over there, but I don't think we can do the WebEx thing over there. But that's what we're about here, so it's time to bring back, you know, I was thinking, I was hoping that the COVID situation had somewhat resolved when I broached this topic, but of course it hasn't. But that's our plan right now. So I'm going to adjourn the meeting to December 14th at 5 o'clock at the college. What do we call that?
Roadrunner Cafe.
Roadrunner Cafe. Thank you. And it'll give you a chance to see what we're talking about when we talk about it over there. It's one heck of a facility, so.
5 o'clock there, 7 o'clock here.
Yes, sir. Okay, I'll entertain a motion. Mr. Van Landijk and
I'll second.
Mr. McGuire. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you, David, for your help. Share that discussion.
So thanks for those maps to come back.